Hello everybody, and welcome to this ELN webinar in partnership with Basware. My name is Peter Dorrington and I'm going to be the host for this webinar, which is about how to fuel your procure-to-pay processes with high quality e-invoice data. So I'm delighted to be joined today by two expert speakers. Firstly, we have Gustav from Basware. Hello, Gustav.
Hello.
And we have François from Fluxym.
Hello, hi everyone.
Hi. Now, Gustav and François will introduce themselves properly in just a moment. But before they do, I would just like to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So firstly, this is a webinar, so you don't need to worry about your camera being on or muting your microphone. But if you're with the live webinar, we'd love to hear from you. So if you have questions or observations, then please do enter them into the comments section. I'll be keeping an eye on those and we will try to answer as many of them as we can towards the end. Now, our agenda today is in a few very simple portions. In a moment, Gustav is going to set the scene for us. We have a few slides for that. Don't worry, it's not death by PowerPoint. It literally is just a few slides. And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time in a conversation where we're sharing our experiences and discussing some of the important topics around this theme of improving P2P with e-invoicing before we come to a final Q&A. And then just a few seconds before the end, I'll do the briefest of summaries and talk about what's going to happen next. So then, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Gustav. So Gustav, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to set the scene for us about why this is such an important topic to be talking about today.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for the introduction. Today I'll be talking about data in your system, in your AP system, and also touching upon compliance. I'm Gustav. I work within our pre-sales organization where I speak to customers about exactly those topics. So I talk to our customers about how they can improve the data, what do they have to do to be compliant, and so on. And with me, I have our partner representative, François, if you want to say hello as well.
Yes, I'm François. So I'm working with Fluxym. Fluxym is the system integrator. It's a long-time Basware partner. So we are working together to implement electronic invoicing solution and invoice processing solution. And at Fluxym, I am working as a consultant specialized in all the electronic invoicing topics. Thank you, Gustav.
Thank you. So as I said, I'll talk about data and I'll talk about compliance. And when I am out speaking to customers about this, I notice a very big rather different levels on how far you come in your process with this. And to gauge a little bit on where we are here, I will include some poll questions. So first I'll talk about how to automate. What is the step one? What do you need? How to get your data into the AP process? And then I'll talk about how do our best customers work with their data? And then I'll touch on compliance. But to gauge where we are right now, we do have a poll for you. Peter, if you want to run that.
Great, thank you very much. So we're going to do our first poll. And the question is this. Are you using data for improving your accounts payable processes today? So the answers are yes, fully, yes, to some extent, no, but we want to, no, there's no need, or something else. Now, if it's something else, please put that in the comments. So the poll is now live. We're going to let that run for a few seconds. Whilst we do, then Gustav, let me just ask a quick question about your impressions. We're obviously going to talk about things like automation and transformation, but I think a lot of organizations have been looking at transformation, but they haven't really seen it as an opportunity to make some fundamental change. So they may speed up an existing process, but they haven't really had an opportunity to change. And I was just wondering whether that's what you're seeing, that people have thought that P2P transformation is simply making it fast, when of course I believe it should be more than that.
Mm. And here, there's a very big difference among customers I speak to in terms of their maturity when it comes to this. Some have come very far, some are in the beginning of the process, and some haven't really considered the topics you bring up yet. And that's a big shift from a few years ago, where even fewer had even begun that transformation or even reached the targets.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is one of the things that I'm not frustrated. That's too strong a word, but it's something that I think has been up for a mind. Anyway, let's give the results now. Wow, this is quite interesting. So, Gustav, I'm hoping this is either reflecting what you expected or maybe the cause for conversation. So then, answers to that question about are you using data for improving your accounts payable processes are these. So, yes, fully, 11%, so about a tenth. Yes, to some extent, almost half at 48%. No, but we want to is a third, so 33%. No, there's no need, 0. And we've had a couple of people answer with 7% other. Now, what I think is very interesting here is they're either embarking on that process or they want to, which I suspect is pretty much what you were expecting, Gustav.
I'm very happy to see that there's 0% on no, there's no need on the answers here. I mean, when you look at the answers here, data in AP processes, that used to be what you had available, like reports in your system, your own Excel compilations of whatever data you could gather. And then you would improve your AP processes based on your own experience, your gut feeling, and clues you get from that data. But now when you have the possibility to get full data, you can get a full data import with all the invoice data. You can get a full data export of all the data generated within your system. So all your AP actions happening with the AP process. Then improvement can come not only from experience and gut feeling, but also from actual evidence that you can see from the data. So I'm happy with the results here, especially when there's nobody answering no to this one. And then moving on, I'll talk a little bit on the importance of data and your wants, what I call step 1 here. What you're after is, of course, developing. You're after saving money. And in this context, we talk about automation used for saving money, because manual processes, they cost money, they cost time, and they cost a friction for development. You really get stuck with the manual processes and difficult to move forward. And so you can automate them. And that can happen in 2 ways. You can do a static automation where you set up very predefined rules, such as if the PO number starts with a 9 and the supplier is Acme, then assign dimension Y. The other way to automate is a more dynamic one, and that's more, shall we say, the future one, where you're not using any kind of predefined rules, but rather organically developed rules, where the computer and AI engine will give you suggestions saying, hey, we noticed that 95% of your invoices where the PO number starts with a 9 and the supplier is Acme, well, they were assigned to dimension Y. Shall we set up such a rule going forward? And for this to be able to happen, you need machine learning. And the machine learning can only work with good data. So this then comes back to the having good data as a step 1. And you can put it into a cycle, even a flywheel cycle like this, where if I start from the top left here, your goal is to increase your business. That's what you want to do. You want to grow, you want to get better. And in order to do so, you need to optimize your processes. You need to see where the laggards are, what we can do better, and so on. And to be able to optimize, well, then you need the visibility. You need to be able to work with and learn from all the data points. And that is both the incoming data mentioned earlier, so the data you get from the suppliers, as well as the generated data. So whatever happens within your AP workflow. So to be able to have the visibility, you need the data. And this is the step 1. Once you have the data, well, we can go back even one one step further to increase business, because the momentum builds up here, the more and more you get. And so once you increase business, you have more data, and then you can get more visibility, you can optimize and get better business, increase business, and so on. So the kind of insight you might be looking at within AP is, for example, why invoices are failing, which invoices are getting stuck, and where are they getting stuck in the process. You want to prevent overpayment and compare what was paid with what should have been paid. You want to optimize invoice timing. You know your suppliers, and optimize to pay at the right moment to those suppliers. And then even better, like getting automated suggestions. So using AI to suggest how to handle invoices, for example, code interventions and so on, or to find anomalies like fraud detection and other big errors. And going even one step further, to have a predictive analysis where you get a forecast of what invoices will probably get stuck in the system, where will you have a big workload. So this is why you need the data to be able to get those kind of insights. And going and seeing that most people have been looking at improving data. Peter, you want to ask this question as well?
Yes, thank you very much, Gustav. This is a slightly longer question. So it's this. What is hindering you, or what's stopping you from improving your data quality? Is it 1, internal processes or resistance? 2, unwilling suppliers? 3, costs or resources? 4, the knowledge in order to do it. The strategy, systems is question 5. Other for 6. Or 7, we've already got a full data quality solution. So the poll's live. Let's take a few seconds to do that. And whilst we do that, let me just again talk to Gustav about this, because you've mentioned data so many times, and you're absolutely right. If you're in business today, you're in the business of data. It's pretty much impossible to run any modern business without having data. It enables all our processes. But the thing I thought that was particularly powerful is when you talked about insights and optimization. Because one of the things I hear so many companies saying is we've got lots of data, but precious little insight. And if we don't have insight, how could we possibly choose or navigate to the best possible future? So I'd just like to get your thoughts on that, about this evolution, isn't it? The data just tells us what happened. Insights might tell us why it happened, but obviously what we're aiming for is the optimal insight that tells us what's the best that could happen.
And there's also a shift here, because if you look at data and how you would analyze the data, it used to be that you look at the data and you try to improve based on the data. They take one step further, and you're able to have, with more data, you get analysis where you're able to dig more deeper into data and see, for example, bottlenecks and so on. And if you go one step further, then you have more of an insight where you get also predictions and advice from the data. So it's really taking it, going from those Excel tables onto like full, shall we say, assisted insights that you can work with.
Yeah, thanks, Gustav, because you're right. I mean, it's one thing to draw a trend line. That's relatively straightforward. But of course, what we all want to do, particularly in a world which is very volatile and chaotic, is really just understand, well, what could I do to influence that? So maybe I don't want the trend to do that. Anyway, let's have a look at the results then. In answer to the question, what's hindering you from improving your data quality? Top answer, internal processes or resistance with 38%, followed by unwilling suppliers. I think we're going to talk about that one. That's about 15%. Cost or resources, about a quarter on 22%. Knowledge, about 11%. The systems, also about 11%, and other 3.7%. So it seems like the top answer is internal processes and resistance, but we have 2 other answers that did quite well. We've got the cost and resources, but another question we'll come to in a moment is unwilling suppliers, because of course they need to be part of the solution as well.
And first, I want to say I would feel my hands being tied as well if I had to choose one of these as well. This is really a question where you would want to answer multiple different ones.
All of the above.
Well, hopefully not. But with internal processes and resistance being the highest, that is something I notice well when I talk to customers. And it's not so much of well, it can be to some extent where people say this is the way it has always been done and this works, no need to change it. It's more of complicated processes, in my experience, that are difficult to change. We really need to work with change management. And I think Nicolas François will agree with me that it's one thing to implement a good and great AP system, and it's a whole other thing to get the benefits of it. And so we work a lot with change management. Unwilling suppliers is very region dependent, I think. In some regions, it is the suppliers who are driving the change. In other ones, it's the opposite. And suppliers can be lazy. They may not include all the data they should or could on the documents, or they might put them in the wrong format and the wrong fields and so on to make it difficult. And then, of course, cost resources being a second here. Change management takes time and money. It's a big investment to change big processes, of course. Looking at our customers, the ones who do best, the ones we call our trailblazers. So Basware, we invest heavily in data. We do that to analyze usage and develop our product. We use data to improve machine learning across our customers. So that means if we have a supplier sending invoices to one customer, then we learn from the invoices that supplier is sending, not only to you, our customer, but the invoices that supplier is sending to our other customers as well. We also use data to help our customers benchmark to see where they are and where they could be. And so our trailblazer customers are the ones who have implemented this step one, having the great data. And what they do is they have a highly automated accounts payable process. Even when human touch is needed on invoice, it's more of confirming or monitoring than actually working on the invoice. And they process electronic invoices straight through. So that means the invoice goes through a basically automated monitored flow. And that's really nice when you get this happening. They manage to capture early payment discounts. And this goes back to timing the invoices, knowing when is the money better with your supplier because of a discount, and when is the money better in your own account to accumulate interest. They provide suppliers with self-service and real-time visibility. So this means that your suppliers do not have to call you, email you, asking what is the status of the invoice, have you received this invoice, and so on. But rather they can see this in an automated way online. They process invoices in 1 day or less. And this means, again, invoices are handled straight away and there are no bottlenecks. And processing an invoice, of course, does not mean until it's paid, but when it's ready to be paid. I mentioned earlier that data is two-part. Again, the data that is imported, that's invoices mainly, and the data that is generated when you work in the system. And talking a bit more then on the importing part, when you import data. And moving over a little bit more towards the compliance part here, which is another very hot topic today and going forward. As I said, I speak a lot to our customers, and the terms we use mean different things for different people. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. An invoice very simply can be transferred in 3 different ways, through 3 methods. We have a paper invoice, we have a PDF invoice, and we have an e-invoice. A paper invoice is one, where you print it on paper, you put it in an envelope, and you ship it over, or you hand it off at the reception or the buyer. A PDF invoice is either one that has been created on a computer, so you print it from Word or your AR system, or it might be one that has been scanned, a scanned paper invoice, basically. And an e-invoice is a data document, a data file that is sent from the supplier to the buyer. It's not meant to be viewed in its original form by humans, but rather we you need to create some kind of visualization of the e-invoice. And my main takeaway from this slide is that e-invoices are not the same as PDF invoices. An e-invoice may contain a PDF, but it's not the same. So when I talk about e-invoices, I'm not talking about sending PDFs over email and so on. And what you want to do, what your suppliers want to do, and what we want everybody to do is to move away from paper to PDF or from PDF to e-invoicing, because it has a lower cost for everybody, it is faster, and it's the most secure, the best data you can get. Also, to set the stage a little bit with compliance, so to make sure we are all on the same page. Again, this is something I notice when I talk to customers on how much you know about this, but there's a big shift going on in how invoices are transferred, the compliance models. I'm going to show 2 more slides to go into a bit more detail on these, but what's causing this shift is that many countries have noticed a VAT gap. So there's a gap between the VAT being reported to the tax authorities and the VAT actually printed on the invoice. In countries, they want to close this gap. And so they do this by implementing various control methods on how invoices may be transferred. It's the post-audit model and there's the clearance model. The post-audit model is what we have in, I'm based in Finland, what we have in Finland, in Northern Europe, in North America, and so on. And it's a pretty simple one. The supplier gets the order, sends the invoice, sends the goods, and then sends the invoice. And then afterwards, both parties, the supplier and the buyer, they report to the tax authorities. Clearance model, on the other hand, their invoices need to be reported at the time of transmission to the tax authorities. So here the supplier will receive the order, they will send the goods, but the invoice can no longer be sent straight on to the buyer, but it must go through tax authorities, or it must get a stamp from tax authorities, or many other models. This is a very fragmented setup on how it's done. So this means there are responsibilities for the supplier, there might be responsibilities for the buyer, or there might be responsibilities for both already when the invoice is transferred. This is the model we see in Southern Europe, Italy being a very prominent example, all of South America more or less, and many countries in Asia. And there are more and more countries moving in this direction. Especially for us in Europe, of interest is Poland and France. And I will not go into detail about what's happening in those countries, so I have to say some very basic information. Poland will start 2024 with their clearance model. There are mainly requirements on the supplier, how the invoice can be transmitted and what fields must be present on the invoice. There are things that might need to be done by the buyer as well, such they can collect the invoices from the exchange portal, KSEF. But it's mostly for the sender supplier to take action here. France, on the other hand, will require actions by both the buyer and the supplier. They have a staggered introduction, starting 2024, with the largest company going first, and then the medium-sized companies, and finally the smallest companies. And in France, only e-invoices will be accepted once this comes into force. And there are, as I said, actions required by both the supplier and buyer. If you want to keep up with this, then I do recommend the Basware compliance map. This is available at the link here, basware.com/compliance map. Here we list the requirements for each and every country. Unfortunately, I can't promise that we have all countries available because there are so many, but for the major markets, they are available there. But back to you, Peter.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Gustav. And again, as you were speaking, there were a couple of things that really went through my mind. The first of which was, transformation isn't just us. Clearly, government is going through transformation as well. And I can understand why they want to close the VAT gap, because we're going through an economic recession pretty much everywhere right now. And government has always been very keen on collecting the money that it's owed. although it hasn't always been very good at doing it. The second of which is that as a byproduct of doing this, the data becomes much more readily available. And not only will it support more straight-through processing, which is normally a good thing because it's a resource cost, which means you can free up people to do things that actually add value to the business. But we do get those opportunities to look at, well, where can we optimize? You mentioned, for example, working with suppliers, getting those discounts for early payment. But that's one of the indirect things as well. Managing a supplier base where their health and well-being is as important to your future as making sure your own team and employees are. Anyway, what we're going to do now for the next few minutes is we're going to have a bit of a conversation. Now, I have got some topics of conversation that I would like to explore with Gustav and François, but please, if there's anything that anybody watching the live broadcast would like to add, pop it into the comments and we'll see if we can get it in. So the first question, Gustav, I'm going to come back to you as a result of some of the things you were saying is, you, I think, alluded to that, but I'd like to get a little bit more detail in this, is why is e-invoicing, i.e. that server-to-server relationship, key to successful and future P2P operations?
Well, imagine your colleague is inviting you to a calendar event, you know, at work, and you want to have it in your calendar. Now, would you have your colleagues send over the event invites via paper and you then type it into your calendar? Would you have them rather send it as a PDF by email and you can copy paste it into the calendar? Or would you prefer to have as an automatic email that goes straight into your calendar? And I hope the answer here is the last option. You like to have it go straight into your calendar as an automatic integration. And that is what e-invoicing can do. E-invoices mean there's no need to transform the invoice. It can go straight into your AP system where the data needs to be. This is also kind of a preparation for the future because the data needs to be there. And this is a hot topic for all AP departments all around the world. So your competitors are doing the same thing as you need to do now. They will want to move from paper to PDF to E. Paper will always be subpar in terms of getting the data into the system because you will always have to have either a camera trying to read the data, or you will also have to have somebody who keys in the data, or a combination of the two. PDFs, they can suffer from the same as above because a PDF that is basically a scan of a paper will have to have some kind of camera recognition there as well. And if you have a good PDF system, well, then that PDF system can go into the file itself and grab the data from it without using any kind of camera technology. But then we have e-invoices, and they are pure data. They are really nice. And I think when I look at the audience list before this meeting, I think they are well known here and with the benefits. You know, for something to go wrong with an e-invoice, the input needs to be wrong. The supplier will have to make a mistake, and then you should have a good AP system to cover that mistakes. But there won't be any problems with the data coming in. Another big benefit of e-invoices is they're language independent. It doesn't matter if you receive an invoice in Greek or in Swedish. You know, the data will still come in right. And they're really fast. You know, takes only seconds or minutes to transfer, and they have the lowest cost. And then we have the compliance benefits as well, because many of those countries, or most actually, who move into these clearance model where you need to involve tax authorities already during transfer, they also say the invoice must be an e-invoice. They no longer will accept, for example, paper invoices. And you don't need to, well, again, with the data, it's all there. You don't need to worry what is header level, what's row level. It will all come into your system, right? So for e-invoicing, I mean, the questions you probably asking yourself in AP are, how many invoices were automatically matched? How many exceptions are we having? How much spend is committed via payment plans or so on? And how many invoices were paid on time? And to work with those questions, one of the key questions is, well, what is our e-invoice rate? So that, I'd say, would be a long answer to your question.
No, thank you, Gustav. There's lots of things there that add value, and I just want to unpack one or two of them. One thing that for me as a supplier is really important is that ability to track where's my payment, where's my invoice being processed. I suspect that many departments that handle this is actually a bulk of their interactions with suppliers, people chasing invoices and payments, trying to work out, well, where am I? Because I submitted it and it's gone into some black hole, and I just hope that I get paid on time. The other thing, as you said, is that where that isn't the case, or where it might be a cause, is where there's been a miskey. Some data is wrong. There's something with the invoice that is impossible to match. And so we have all of those exceptional cases. But once you start dealing with raw data, you don't get the translation errors, which I think you can get when you're looking at, firstly, paper. Even PDF isn't entirely devoid of it. So anything you can do that can remove the amount of effort in processing those exceptional cases, or remove the cause for having to do it in the first place, is really important. Which brings me to my second question, because this is something, as I just mentioned, we all have to deal with. So how do we ensure that we're getting high quality data off our invoices? Because that's absolutely fundamental to a new approach to P2P, isn't it? I mean, as you did say a little earlier, if you put garbage data in, then it's really going to impact the process, and we end up with more of our invoices having to be manually processed or treated as exceptions rather than straight through. So what can we do to make sure that we are capturing high quality data off our invoices?
And that's a good question. So coming back to the three invoice channels I mentioned. So for paper, you need to do camera, you need to do OCR. You cannot get away from it. And then what you can do it to improve the OCR quality is to have some kind of manual validation where somebody checks that the I is an I and not a 1 or an L and so on. For PDF, sometimes you will have to do OCR. When it's a scanned image, then that's the only thing you can do. But when it's a data PDF, one has been computer generated, one way you can basically copy paste data from within it, then skip the OCR and have a system that goes into the PDF, extracts the data instead, because then a 1 will always be a 1 and nothing else. And with PDFs, there are also many hybrid formats coming where there's both an image and data in the same file. And that's a development that we started a few years back that is growing. And then when it comes to e-invoices, well, conversions should be automatic. An e-invoice should be sent to you and you just arrives in your AP system. The one thing that is still a bit of a topic here is that you may need to onboard your suppliers. When you get an e-invoice address to be able to receive e-invoices, you need to tell your suppliers, hey, this is my e-invoice address. I will now be able to receive invoices through Basware or some other operator. Please send it to me. So it's a bit of a supply onboarding there. And then there's also regional differences. I mentioned Northern Europe earlier. So here in Nordics, you will be getting e-invoice rates of 80% or higher if you work well with your suppliers. But if you take a step south and go to more of continental Europe with Germany, PDF is a lot more common already. In North America, USA, e-invoice is the capability is there, but it's pretty much non-existent. When I talk to my American customers, and it's PDF. That's the thing that they want, and there's also a lack of standards there. There are some countries that are surprising, and that is Italy, for example. It's South America, where you will be able to get invoice rates that are close to 100%. And that's because of the local legal mandates that are there. So the suppliers will have to send invoices. Africa is mostly paper, some countries load PDF. And Asia is very mixed between different countries, what is there. But again, to help ensure you get quality data is you need to work with your suppliers to move from paper to PDF to E. And that's either a campaign you run your own, or you utilize the help of somebody like us or our partners to analyze the supply base. Which ones can we target? Which ones can we get over to e-invoicing and thereby capture a big chunk? That would be my answer, Peter.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Gustav. I think we might touch back on that in a moment, how we engage suppliers. But before we do, we've had one question which I'd like to quickly put to you, Gustav, and then I'll give you a moment's rest and I'll go to François. But the question was this. It's from Tanya, who asks, are e-invoices ERP agnostic? So I suspect the answer will be about standards.
Yes.
Well, the short answer is yes. So the short answer to if they're agnostic, yes, they are. So an e-invoice is a data file where it says the supplier name is this, the PO number is this, and so on. And it's just a matter of importing that data into your ERP or AP system. So when you receive an e-invoice, it's just a matter of agreeing together with your operator what data should we place where for it to be imported into ERP. So yes, e-invoices can be used with all ERPs and AP invoices.
Great, thank you very much, Gustav. As you say, the data itself is agnostic. A name is a name is a name. There may be some interesting wrinkles about things like format, but we can thrash that out in the standards. So I'm going to go to François now. François, I'd like to bring you in this conversation. And really, I want to talk about an example. So let's talk about, well, the question is this, the issue is this, how do we remain compliant with global mandates, such as the upcoming France 2024 e-invoicing mandate? Now, I don't want to focus too much on that, but it's a good example of the way that many governments are going. So how do we remain compliant with global mandates, such as that in France?
Yeah, that's a really big challenge, because obviously you would understand that every country has its own view of the mandate, and that's the first very important topic. And no one wants to do exactly as the other one has done. So that's the first challenge. And so you will have as much as model as you have countries. So yes, we said that we have this clearance model in a Y, like it's done in Italy and like it will be done in France. So that's the same kind of model, but the format, all the way the data is going to be exchanged will be completely different. Okay, and that's why it is very important to rely on a global, global operator that can manage, if you have that kind of challenge, to deal with invoices from almost everywhere in the world. You will need a global operator that has the ability to manage those different formats, those different regulations. That's where I will make the link to the compliance map that has been explained by Gustav. But this is very important. And if you look at that compliance map and click on several countries, you will see that no country has the same answer as the other. So this is the main challenge. So first of all, obviously, you have to scope. You have to make a scoping of what you want to do. You have to set the scene of what's going to be your project. Where are my suppliers? And obviously, when we are talking about compliance, where are my clients? Where are my customers? Because it's a two-way process. I have to manage the supplier invoices, and I have to manage the invoices that I'm going to send to my customers. Okay, and as we said earlier, the main challenge will be most of the time on the sending side, because this is where you create the information. When you receive the information, from the supplier. You are not creating, you are interpreting the information, you are putting it in your systems the best way you can. But when you are the supplier and you are creating the invoice for your customers, you are creating the information, and that's where you need to be sure that you're going to first follow the expected regulation, and then do the things in the right way to avoid any discrepancies in the future and any exception when your customer is going to process the invoice.
I'll add to that as well, François. It's very true what you say. It's so fragmented. Each country will implement their own model on how clearance should work, and it's a lot of work for the AP people, it's a lot of work for the AR people, and it's a lot of work for us operators here. But there's a benefit to it, and that is usually the invoice mandate comes with it, where it says you have to send e-invoices, which is a benefit, at least, that then you'll be able to get the invoice rate high.
Yeah, thanks very much, François. Gustav, I'll come back to you in just a moment, François, but before I do, just struck me, isn't this the story everywhere? Government always decides to go that their way is better than everybody else's, and they can't agree on one common standard, but at least the data is reliable and standard. So yes, the processes may be different and the file formats may be different, but underpinning data is certainly there. But Gustav, you raised a very good point there. Not only is this a way of being compliant as business, it's actually a very efficient way of being a business. So in one ways, yes, we may not like change being pushed upon us, but it does bring about good within the business. It reduces costs, it reduces errors, it enables us to foster better relationships with our suppliers, and at the end of the day, with our customers too. Because let's not forget, they don't care where the problem may lie somewhere in our processing chain. All they care is the way that it impacts them. The true is also the case of suppliers, that they don't care that we might have a problem in our processes. What they care about is where's my money. So yeah, we have some quite big drivers doing this, but this all sounds very well and good. But François, what I'd like to do is ask you, I guess this is going to be a two-part question. So the first part is this. Obviously, this is something we're going to have to do. We could accelerate it because it is, as we said, a good thing to do, but we're going to have to do it at some point. So could you share any best practices in e-invoicing that you've seen in the marketplace? So you've been involved in lots of implementation. Have you got any best e-invoicing practices that you could share with us?
Yes. So I don't know, Gustav, if you can show that slide, but that would be important to people to understand that there is a step to follow to get an e-invoicing project working well. First of all, we talk a lot since 20 or more minutes about invoice data, but you have to talk about supplier data. So you need to have clean supplier information. You need to make sure that your supplier data has a good quality, because even if you got electronic invoices with everything properly set up, no interpretation, no CR, no manual keying, everything's going to be electronic. If you got the information from your invoice and you don't have the relevant supplier data, it's going to be useless, okay? Because you have to link the invoice information to your suppliers. So first of all, you will have to focus and ensure that your supplier master data is up to date, and that you have all the information to manage your supplier properly regarding the invoice process. And the main information will be obviously some tax ID information, because how are you going to select the right supplier when an invoice is coming in? It's based on supplier fiscal ID. You will need that information at some point. So you will need to maintain some information in your supplier master data to make sure that when the invoice is coming, it's going to be set on the right supplier. Okay, that's something you will have to focus on when you start an invoicing project. Obviously, you will going to need a receiving channel. Okay, so you will need a way. We are talking about electronic information. You will need a receiving channel. It's like when you want to communicate, you're going to need a computer, you're going to need a phone, whatever. For the invoices, you're going to need a receiving channel. That's why you will contract with, depending on your volumes and depending of the data you want and the level of exchange you want to do electronically, you will have to contract with a network operator. So Basware has got a network that is a worldwide network, but there are several other operators. But you will have someone who manage your communication, okay? Because you cannot set up as a customer, you cannot set up a point-to-point connection with every of your suppliers. You will need a network to manage that, and all the new compliance programs coming from governments are based on a kind of centralized network that would help you to manage that. But at any point, you will need to connect to a receiving channel. Okay. okay, to get that information. And then also after that, when you have those electronic invoice coming in your company, okay, you can print them, but that's not what you want to do. You don't want to get everything electronic and then print an invoice to send it to the approval process. Okay, you will want an electronic process inside your company to manage the invoice flow. Okay, and that's why you have to review and think about your invoice processing inside your company. Because it's one thing to get the invoice from the supplier, it's one thing to have it with high quality data, but then you have to manage it inside your company with the right process. And that's very important. So you have to, if you want to go to what we call a touchless invoice processing, you have to focus on this first. Get an invoice, get a receiving channel, ensure your supplier data is accurate and up to date, and think about your internal process about managing your invoices. Gustav, do you want to add something on this?
No. You gave a great answer, 2 thumbs up.
He's very wisely shaking his head. So I think it is a great point. And I do like this thing that you were mentioning there, François. It isn't just the data. We do have to have a process. We have to have the ability to do that. Otherwise, it's just improving one step. And I said right at the beginning that transformation, by definition, implies that we change. So we have to look at more than just automating or simplifying or streamlining just one part of the process, if for no other reason than we miss such a big opportunity in not picking up the others. Now, we've had a couple of questions coming in and an observation. So first I wanted to do is, earlier on, Sarah mentioned about our second poll. She also thought it was unfair. We could only choose one answer from that. I think I wholeheartedly agree. I doubt that anybody is suffering from all of them, but certainly multiple things can apply there. We've also had a couple of questions, and they're from another François. So first question is this, and I'll come back to a couple more, but keep questions coming in. So François, I guess this is going to be the other François asked you, how does punch-out process could be implemented within Basware? So now I must admit, this is beyond my area of expertise. So if I've not pronounced that correctly, please do let me know. But how does a punch-out process be implemented within Basware?
So if we are talking about the punch-out being the ability for an organization to access the catalog of another company through a system. So that's something that your procurement system should be able to do, but that won't have that won't be linked to that won't be directly linked to the invoice processing. Invoice processing will benefit of that because you will have a fully integrated process to place your orders to your suppliers. Then your supplier can use some kind of flip order solution that will flip an order to an invoice, and that will enhance the quality of your data. But at the end, I think that would be 2 separate processes. But obviously, you can having a punch-out system, meaning using a catalog from a supplier, is relevant with the invoicing process. You can use the 2 systems together. So yes, but I would like to have a bit more information, and maybe we can answer that out of for the exact question. But for me, there is no issue to use a punch out with the electronic invoices process.
Great. Thank you very much, François. And I think rather than get drawn into quite a long and what I suspect might be a detailed conversation, why don't we save this for the offline meeting that will follow? I'll tell folks about that in a moment. So another point, and this is an interesting one. Again, I don't know whether François or Gustav, which of you would like to take this? We didn't talk about subcontractors, supplies, or specific tax populations. Now, the subcontractor one is an interesting one because I've been watching what's been going on with ESG reporting. And in some ways, it felt to me like an earlier example of what we're seeing when it comes to some of the ways in which we're doing clearance model, in that it starts with the big organizations having to report things like their vulnerability to climate change and carbon footprint. and it's inevitably flowing down the supply chain. So the big organizations then go to the smaller organizations that supply them and say, well, we need this data so that we can complete it. And then the smaller organizations go to the yet smaller ones, and so on and so forth. So I guess, would either of you like to give some thoughts about, well, how do we take this into account, where we've got subcontractors, or we're just saying that we're one step removed from that? We have a relationship with our direct suppliers, and is it up to them to figure out how they deal with their suppliers?
I'd say I'd look at this question from a slightly different perspective, related still, and that's when looking at data privacy and data, how it's handled. So there, with GDPR and so on, there's a very big importance on where your data is stored, to whom is it given, for what, and what can happen with your data. And there, with most operators, you will sign an agreement and the operator will make promises to you in terms of how that data will be handled and how they are compliant with GDPR. In terms of ESG, so in terms of how you manage your suppliers so how you manage your subcontractors from an environmental and social perspective and so on, that's again going back to the ratings of the ESG, where ESG is a good tool to see both us, for example, Basware, and our competitors, other players in the market, their ratings, and we're happy to supply from our list, supply a list of subcontractors and where they are with their ratings.
Thanks very much, Gustav. And François, let me see if I can come to you, because the other part of François Bonnet's question was about specific tax populations. So I'd like to know if you've got a comment about that.
Yes, tax is a very interesting issue, I would say, because we said that for clearance model we have at least one model per countries, but for taxes we have more than one model per countries, and so we have in some of the countries we have regional taxes, local taxes. So to be honest, taxes is a nightmare. Huh? So anything that's going to help you to manage tax in your incoming invoices would be very helpful. So what we do use in that kind of, when we do electronic invoices, what we will do, we will make a special part of the project work on taxes and work on prediction tables. You can have, and we can set up prediction tables as long as we got the information. We can set a prediction table that will help you to put the taxes in the right box, basically. Okay, use the right tax code or the right tax information, and even populate some information in your internal system to ease the reporting process to your government, because tax is about reporting to your government. Okay, so everything that was difficult with paper invoices or non-electronic invoices will be eased by using electronic invoices, because you would have relevant information. You won't make any errors in capturing the numbers, which is when you use paper invoices, it's very often that you will make errors in capturing the information. So with electronic invoices, you won't do any capturing errors, but you can have some prediction tables that will tell you, okay, I have that kind of purchase category, that kind of supplier, that kind of goods, whatever, and I will put that in the relevant tax code. So and that's something the computers can do quite easily, is decide based on a given rules, and you can also include some artificial intelligence about that. But first of all, you will have having the tax properly processed means you have the tax properly captured on the invoice. And again, this brings back to the supplier, which has the responsibility to populate properly the invoice. Okay, so it's not just about you; it's about also your supplier to put the right information in the right place.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, François. Yes, I think that this is one of the areas when you have good, reliable data, there's nowhere to hide when it comes to mistake. You can't really debate whether that was a 1, a capital I, or a lowercase l that was in that field. It pretty much is what it is. And anything we can do to streamline efforts around tax, I think it's got to be a good thing. Although I hear tax accountants now howling in anguish that they're going to be out of a job if we carry on this way. Don't worry, government is always very keen on getting tax. They'll come up with something new. And that's something that I think is quite important, because this is not a static environment. It's constantly changing. So I'm going to come back to Gustav with one extra question that, as we were talking, I was really thinking about this, because we talked about the complexity and the volatility in these regimes. So Gustav, I'd really like to understand in just a couple of minutes, if you wouldn't mind, how can Basware help with managing this change that's constantly going through? You've got the compliance map. We can see what's going on in the world, but clearly you're at the core of a solution. So what is it that Basware can add into this that makes our lives a little bit easier?
Well, first part I would say is this webinar, help educating people about what needs to be done, what's happening in the world, and so on, how can we go forward. Second part is, shall we say, technical enablement, making sure that we supply a tool that enables you to be compliant. And compliance is not just what we talked about with how we transfer an invoice with post-audit versus clearance. Compliance is about how invoices are archived. It is about what formats are used and what channels are used. It's about what data has to be present on an invoice to be a legal invoice. It's about how it's to be reported. And those are the kind of things where you need a good system to work on. So that would be the second, the technical enablement. And then the third is, shall we say, the more helping with change management. When we look at what we sell at Basware, it's a very big deal is, shall we say, the system. But a big chunk as well is helping with change management. So that's where we have our expert consultants and our expert partners who are able to work with you with using best practices and lessons learned from others and on how to implement all of this.
Great, thank you very much, Gustav. Yeah, and you touched on actually all three things. It's a combination of having the right processes, the right technologies, the platform, and change management for people. And for my observation into this, the best way to enable change management is to demonstrate to other people how you help them. So what's in it for them? What do they benefit? How do suppliers benefit? How do your AP team benefit? How does the organization benefit? Anyway, I've got an eye on the time. We're just about out of time. So let me just pick up on a couple of things that I was listening to as we were going through. So what I was hearing was that e-invoicing is coming. There's no getting away from it. It's a good thing anyway. But if your territory is not already doing it, they will. It's just too attractive for governments, particularly the compliance model. I think clearance model is ideal for them. Secondly, as we just mentioned, transformation implies that there's change, and if you've got change, you need to manage it. The third thing I would point out is that in my experience, transformation programs do go astray, but it's often as a result of not choosing the right partner. And by that, I mean, choose a partner that will help you identify what it is that you need to do. That was my question about, with so much changing all the time, how can we as individuals possibly stay on top of all of that? Well, choose a partner that can help you. So choose a partner that is keeping their finger on these multiple pulses and bringing solutions forward, but also can tell you what questions you should be asking, not just the ones that are in the requirements. And they'll also help you prioritize those requirements and come up with a timeline. And clearly, you can have the right tooling from an organization like Basware, which will enable you to do that. It will cover a lot of the world, but there will always be some exceptions. So you need somebody who can help you with that as well. So then, what are we going to do next? Well, we're going to reach out to everybody that's on the webinar and give you an opportunity to keep asking those questions or have a conversation in a one-to-one environment. I look at that as a way of picking the brains of some of the most talented people in the marketplace. So look out for those emails, take advantage of that opportunity to continue this conversation going, but making it super specific to you. And with that, all that really remains for me to do is to firstly thank our two experts. So thank you, Gustav. Thank you, François. You were excellent. I've really, as you may have seen, been taking loads of notes. I want to thank Basware for their sponsorship, because without them, this wouldn't have happened. Neither would it have happened without the ELN doing all the organizing and the logistics in the background. But last but by no means least, I want to thank all of you for your attention. And until the next time, take care now. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Thank you.